Joy is an accomplished filmmaker with an MFA in creative writing from National University and a bachelor's degree from Howard University, where she studied film and English and graduated summa cum laude. She's the founder of Third Person, how do you say that word? Omniscient Productions. Man, I'm like horrible at grammar today. A production company whose mission it is to produce powerful, meaningful, thought-provoking movies, plays, and television shows that enlighten audiences about the human condition, shed light on the meaning of life, and raise the collective consciousness. She has served as a screenwriting mentor for the DC Shorts Filmmaking Mentor Series and a panelist for the screenwriting panel at the Prince George's Arts and Humanities Council Festival of Literal Arts. That is a mouthful. And then most importantly, she is the author of The Secret of Life Through Screenwriting, How to Use the Law of Attraction to Structure Your Screenplay, Create Characters, and Find Meaning in Your Script, which is available on Amazon. I think at this time that we're going through, we can all use a dose of positivity and remember that the law of attraction, that like attracts like. No matter if you are asking or you're being negative, it's going to come back to you. So thank you guys all for being here. And so Joy, let's just start with a little bit about you and your background and how, first we'll do that. We'll talk about you and your background, and then we'll go into specifically what is the law of attraction. And then from there, we'll go into using that in your writing.
I'm a Jehovah's Witness. And, you know, I think it's a religion that a lot of times is misunderstood by the majority of people, because, you know, people will say like, oh, you have your own Bible and all that kind of stuff. And that's not true at all. Jehovah's Witnesses just have a translation of the Bible that is, you know, is different than the King James Version because it's in modern English. So, you know, you may look at two verses and compare them, and they're like, well, this is different. It's not different. It's just a different translation of English. So that's it. It wasn't like Jehovah's Witnesses had their own Bible that they made up out of thin air. That's not, you know, it at all. But as many religions you find just have different interpretations of the same book. So, you know, I remember being a little kid and my dad was teaching me how to pray, and I probably was like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years old, because I think it was before my brother was born. And my dad is, you know, saying my good nights. So I get a story, we get prayers, all that kind of stuff. And I remember he was praying for a lot of different groups of people. And I remember being a little kid and thinking like, wow, the world is like really messed up. You know, like all these people are, you know, suffering. And I remember being a kid and kind of like thinking to myself, like, how can I make the world better? And, you know, people ask you when you're a little kid, what do you want to be when you grow up? And for me, when I was little, I remember I wanted to be an artist, maybe like around the age of 6. I wanted to be an artist. And so, you know, I was like, oh, you know, like I will draw and paint and everything. And you know, like it became apparent that I wasn't really good at it. So I couldn't draw. I really didn't have any real artistic ability. So I was like, all right, moving on. What can I do now? And it was kind of like, I was around this time, probably about 8 or 9 years old. And I got interested in fashion design, and I would make my Barbie's clothes. And one of my aunts gave me a sewing machine. And it was funny because she gave me a sewing machine, and I was like 8 or 9, and my mom didn't sew. Like that was not like a trade that my mom took up or a hobby that she had. So I got the sewing machine and didn't know how to use it. So I had been like making skirts and dresses and stuff with like thread and needles and everything. And I just was like, okay, like this isn't going to work either. And then I think also for me, it was like, there's no new way to make a skirt. There's no new way to make a dress. You know, I felt like you can't be that revolutionary making clothes, because, you know, clothes are like the basics of a skirt, a shirt, a pair of pants, whatever. So at that point, you know, I was in school, and by this time I'm like 9 or 10 years old, and I go see Home Alone. And like I remember going to the movie. I've been to the movies before Home Alone, of course, you know, but like I remember being in the theater, and there was just like, it was packed, like no empty seats. The whole theater is full. And I just remember like watching Macaulay Culkin play Kevin McAllister, and I just was like, he looks like he's having so much fun. Like he just looks like he's having like the time of his life playing Kevin McAllister. And, you know, I asked my parents, I'm like, you know, can I get an agent? I want to become an actress. Can I get an agent? And they were like, no. Like, so I'm like, oh, okay. So I want to be an actress. They told me I can't get an agent. So what's the next step? What do I do now? So to me, I was like, I'll write a script and I will find actors to play in the script. I'll direct it. I'll make this movie and I'll sell it to 20th Century Fox because they distributed Home Alone.
And this was at 10? You're like, I'm going to do all this stuff.
Like, I like, honestly, I really don't remember how I knew that that's how it worked. I don't know how I knew that that's how it worked, but I knew how that's how it worked. And, you know, I just was like, I'm going to do this. But, you know, during the process, you know, my friends lost interest. Most of the actors were like little kids like me. I only had one adult that was like signed on to play like our uncle who like got custody of us because our mom died. And it was like, you know, my friends lost interest. And so I'm 10 years old and I only have but so much wherewithal of how to do this. So I was like, all right, fine. You know, my friends got bored, you know, but I can still write. I can still write the screenplays and one day I'll make these. So it's how I ended up being a screenwriter instead of an actress. And even till this day, you know, I've taken acting lessons. I'm taking acting lessons right now, but still it's just like the responsibilities of writing and producing and then directing kind of take over everything. So I haven't still had a chance to act, but that's how I became a screenwriter because I wanted to be an actress. And then it was like, I had more interest in the writing because, you know, like they say, the pen is mightier than the sword. And I figured this is how I can contribute to the world and make the world a better place is by, you know, writing movies, writing TV shows, because people read books, but I feel like books don't influence people as much as television and movies and plays and like actual productions where you have somebody acting. I don't feel like
visual elements, yeah.
Yeah, like I don't feel like books inspire people or inspire people to change as much as television does and movies do.
So it's a faster way to get the message out there.
Right.
So
I just
then,
feel like you know, I remember wanting to make a television series from watching ER and loving ER so much. I remember, I think the first time I thought I want to do this, I want to make a TV series was like watching the credits of ER on a Thursday night. And I was just like, this is like such good writing. This is such a great show. I want to do this. Before that, I only wanted to make movies.
Right.
But, you know, it's like, so I feel like performances really inspire. Good writing, good, you know, because like I don't go to the movies to see the writing. I go to the movies to see the actors.
Right.
You know, but the actors have to have actual worthwhile stories to portray, you know?
Right.
So
then how did you come across the secret or the law of attraction? I know that I read somewhere that you, or I think we talked about it before, that you read the book Think and Grow Rich first, and then sort of how did you discover the law of attraction and then sort of realize that, I mean, it sounds like your whole life you've been like manifesting, you know, in that way.
And it's funny because I really, you know, I didn't know any of this. I didn't know. So, okay, so when I was, you know, growing up a Jehovah's Witness, I was trying to figure out what is the meaning of life? Like, why are we here? And the answer that I got was like, we're here to be happy, right? So I thought that's like really generic. Like, we're here to be happy. And I'm like, we're here to be happy, but like a lot of people aren't happy, you know? And I kind of felt personally, the older I got, I didn't feel happy. I felt like, you know, I'm in this religion that's telling me the purpose of life is to be happy, but I don't feel happy. And it took me a long time to realize that for me, the religion was kind of like stifling me. And I wasn't able to be me. I felt like I knew I wanted to make movies. I knew I wanted to be a screenwriter. And I kind of felt like the religion was going to censor me. There was only going to be certain things I could write about. There will only be like a certain way I can present these stories. So at some point I knew I have to get out of this religion. And I just didn't really know how I was going to do that because it's such a tight-knit, close religion. So you kind of don't trust people on the outside of the religion. And that was a problem for me because I'm like, I live with my parents. I don't make enough money to get my own place. So what am I going to do? So I kind of just bided my time, And at some point, I became a high school English teacher. And I remembered hearing something somewhere that, a lot of times teachers get like not specials, but they get like help buying a house because they're teachers, There are a lot of perks that go along with being a teacher, or at least there were back in the beginning of like the 20th century, 21st century or whatever, but nobody wanted to be a teacher. So they had all these incentives if you were a teacher. So I was like, all right, well, maybe I can buy a house, because another thing for me, I didn't want to rent an apartment. I didn't want to like waste money renting an apartment and then like use all your money paying rent and then not know how you're going to buy a house. But remember, I didn't know the secret back then. So I didn't know that if I really wanted to buy a house, I would have been able to figure out a way, but I didn't know this, right? So eventually I was able to buy a house and move out of my parents' house, and I was able to think the way I wanted to think. And I was teaching high school at the time, and a couple of years went by. I made a short film while I was teaching high school, and it was very difficult to do because I don't know anybody who knows what it's like to actually be a teacher. It's like you're grading papers all the time. Every day you're planning a new lesson. And even when you think like, oh, okay, I taught 10th grade last year, so I can just use my lesson plans from next year, you start the school year and like you are under the impression at the end of the previous year that you're going to teach a certain grade. So you might do some preparation. So you're not like hitting the ground, like being stressed out, and you kind of have like your lesson plans. Then you get to school the next year and they're like, oh, sorry, we had to give you 9th grade, or we had to give you 12th grade. So it's like you're back at square one trying to like create lessons and do lesson plans and everything. And I was like burnt out by the end of my 3rd year. So I was like, I gotta go. I gotta like do something else. So I didn't find a job over the summer after my 3rd year teaching high school, but I was just like, I'm not going back to teaching. And the only jobs that were coming my way were like insurance sales jobs. So ultimately I took a job selling insurance. And, when you are in sales, anybody who works in sales knows that there's a lot of like personal development type books that you can read to keep your mind right. Sales is a very mental thing. Like if you go in with a positive attitude, you're going to make more sales than if you are a negative thinker. So my upline at the insurance company was like, hey, Joy, like we have a list of books we recommend that you read these books, and it'll help you with your building your insurance business and making sales and everything. And I had just left the Jehovah's Witness religion, and I feel like what kept me in the religion so long was reading their literature. So I was like, yo, I'm not reading any of these books that he recommends. I'm like, he would tell me like, oh, read this book. And I'm like, yeah, and like I didn't even take note of what he wanted me to read. But I do remember that on the list was a book called Think and Grow Rich. And so I still didn't read the book. So I ended up getting another job in education, working at a university. I was working at an online university. I was an academic counselor. I was still selling life insurance on the side. And, several months after getting that new job, I was like, oh, I'm going to call this company and get my finances in order. So the guy I talked to at the finance company, we had like an hour-long conversation. And he's like, you need to read this book called Think and Grow Rich. So I'm like, what? I'm like, that's that same book that was on that list that my upline at the insurance agency gave me. And I kind of had this belief even then that sometimes the universe is trying to tell you something. I don't know how I had that belief system because I wasn't raised with that type of mentality. But like, for me, I was just like, maybe somebody's trying to tell me something. So let me read this book. So I read the book, and, one of the things that I found with the book, Think and Grow Rich, is that it is completely about the law of attraction. But Napoleon Hill never, ever says law of attraction. He never calls it by that. He basically shows you how to use it, but he never calls it by name. So I had read the book and I was just like, wow, finally something is telling me that by doing what I'm doing and what I've always been doing, I'm going to get what I dreamed of. And I felt like nothing had ever like been able to assure me that my dreams were going to come true. It was just a feeling I had, like, yeah, I think my dreams are going to come true if I keep going after it. But I finally had something outside of me telling me, like, this is how people get their dreams. And this is what you have to do to get your dreams. And I was like, I do that. I do this, I do that, I do that. And then it was like, oh, that's how I get my dreams. And around the same time, I was introduced to, because I looked up Think and Grow Rich on Wikipedia. And in the Wikipedia article, it mentions that what Napoleon Hill is talking about is currently referred to as the law of attraction. Mm-hmm. So I was like, what is the law of attraction? I never heard of it before. I was one of the only people who had never seen Oprah's show when she was on ABC. I was always in school. Like I was either in high school or I was in school or I was working. I never saw Oprah's show. I still have never seen a whole episode of the Oprah Winfrey Show. I didn't really discover Oprah until she started that show, Super Soul Sunday, right, on the OWN network. And so I didn't know she had this woman on her show named Rhonda Byrne, and it's this whole thing around The Secret. But that's what, when I Googled the law of attraction, I think the first thing that popped up was The Secret by Rhonda Byrne. Mm-hmm. So I did what I did with Think and Grow Rich. I had a 40-minute commute to and from work at that time. I'd drive 40 minutes to work and drive 40 minutes home. So I went to the library, or I bought the audio book of The Secret, and I listened to it the same way I listened to Think and Grow Rich on my commute back and forth to work. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like, this is the answer. Like, this is the answer to everything, you know?
So what is the law of attraction? And
so the law of attraction, like, the easy way that people explain it is like attracts like, right? So like, if you are having negative thoughts, you're bringing negative things to you. That's like the simplistic way of explaining what the law of attraction is. But basically what the law of attraction is whatever we are, okay, so the law of attraction basically asserts that we are powerful creators. We are powerful creators. But there are a lot of people and a lot of institutions that don't want people to know that. So one of the things that Rhonda Byrne, if you watch the documentary of The Secret, the first part of the documentary goes through this whole thing of like these secret tablets, like the emerald tablets, or, you know, it's basically people have known about this through the ages, since the dawning of mankind, but it's been hidden because, you know, a lot of people in power don't want you to know that you're a powerful creator. They don't want you to know that you could create the life that you want. A lot of people that are in charge want to stay in charge, right? through the centuries. They want to stay in charge and they want to keep the power. So they make people, you know, believe that life is supposed to be hard and, you know, they're supposed to suffer. But the law of attraction basically is like whatever you believe is what is reflected in your reality. So if you have positive thoughts and you believe that you can achieve, let's say, financial independence, then you're going to find situations that come into your life that help you achieve that goal. Jack Canfield refers to it as your reticular activating system. And a lot of people who are like scientifically minded, that's a better way to explain it to them, because it's like you've narrowed down, like you want something. And so it's like when you buy a Toyota and you drove a Honda before, once you start driving the Toyota, you see Toyotas everywhere. Mm-hmm. Before, when you drove a Honda, you noticed other Hondas. Right. So your reticular activating system makes you kind of like zero in on what you want. So the law of attraction is like, if you're a negative person, you're going to attract negative situations to yourself all the time. And people don't understand this. So right. People who have, like, some people say they have bad luck. Okay. They say nothing good ever happens to me. I have such bad luck. Because that's their belief, that's what they're going to keep experiencing over and over and over again. People who believe they're lucky and that they have breaks all the time experience that over and over and over again. So it's basically knowing how to attract what you want to your life.
So how could somebody then, before we get into how it works in screenwriting and stories, but how can somebody change the way that they think about things? So if somebody says something like, I don't like blah, 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 how can you reframe your brain or work in a way to get yourself to stop doing the I don't likes, because you're still attracting that? It's just negative. So what's some tricks that people can use to
So
reframe?
it's like, you have to kind of be dedicated to change your way of thinking, because it doesn't happen overnight. One of the things, like, I have, people in my life that have like hard time with things, and I try to like, kind of give them advice, and they don't listen to me. And it's like, if you're unhappy, and I mean, like, I'm not going to say I'm happy all the time. I'm not happy all the time. But if you're unhappy, you have to get yourself in some of you have heard of Esther Hicks. Esther Hicks, she channels Abraham, and she talks about the law of attraction a lot. I have heard that a lot of what Rhonda Byrne got from The Secret was actually from Esther Hicks. I've heard that. I don't have anything to validate that or not, but Esther Hicks talks about vibrations a lot. So you attract things based on how your body is vibrating, the energy and vibrations that you give off, right? So if you have a low vibration, you're only attracting low vibrating things and situations to you. So if you are trying to change that around, one thing that helps with that, like one strategy you can use is practicing gratitude. So religions oftentimes talk about being thankful, right? But they're not giving you a real reason of why you should be thankful. They're just saying, be thankful, okay? So it's like, okay, be thankful, but why? Because when you're thankful, you are happier. And when you're happier, your vibration is higher. When your vibration is higher, you attract the things that you want, not the things that you don't want. So, if you have a habit of being unhappy all the time, sit around and think about, like, actually write a list. Like, I started keeping, in 2015, I started keeping a journal that I called my gratitude journal. And Rhonda Byrne has a book called, she has one of her books that she wrote is specifically like about gratitude. You keep a gratitude journal, and her strategy is write down 10 things every day that you're grateful for. 10 different things that you're grateful for every day for 30 days. So you're not allowed to repeat something that you've been grateful for. So you start to become grateful for little tiny things because you can't repeat anything. So you're starting to say things like, oh, I'm grateful for hot water. I'm grateful for running water. I'm grateful for having a dining room in my house. I'm grateful for my microwave. You start to realize like all of the things that exist in your life to make your life easier. You start to appreciate like, oh, I have a great friend. Like my friend is like so dependable. I don't have a boyfriend, but I have a great best friend. Like you start to realize all of the things that you have that perhaps prior to that you took for granted. So it helps to raise your vibration. And then, once you start getting in a habit of keeping a gratitude journal and writing down lists of what you're thankful for, it becomes more habitual. You start noticing things to be grateful for without having to take out a piece of paper and write down a list. And it, when your vibration is higher, work goes better. You might work in customer service. If you're coming to work and you're in an attitude of gratitude where you're like, oh, these things went well for me today. I had a car that got me to work. I, got like a discount on my gas at the gas station. You come in a better frame of mind. So therefore, your customers are like responding to you in a better way because vibration like bounces off of each other. So you might have somebody's in a crappy mood, but you're in such a good mood that your mood kind of infects them. And then your customer is like easier to deal with because you're in a good mood and you're smiling. You start getting good compliments from your customers at work. So then your manager's like, I noticed that, people respond really well to you. I want to give you a promotion. You see, that's the logistical way of how the law of attraction works.
Right.
You know, you start to see like, oh, you know, my inside changed and like my outside is changing.
So how do you relate that by using that? One, we'll start with as a screenwriter or as a creative person. How can you use that to benefit yourself creatively? But then also, then let's go into specifically, you know, why you wrote your book and, you know, break down the law of attraction in each aspect of a script. So first of
Okay,
all, for
well,
just general like creatives, how do you think that the law of attraction will help a screenwriter specifically?
so okay, in terms of your creativity, like I'm gonna give you an example that's not a screenwriter. Okay, I'm gonna give you an example of a woman I spoke to this week. I called Verizon because I was having some issues with my internet. And I called Verizon and I spoke to a customer service tech woman. And, you know, she was like, you really need to update your phone. You need to put the new update on it. And that took a while for it to download. So we started talking. And I found out through talking to her that she had gone to school in 2014 to become a paralegal. And, you know, I asked her, so why aren't you working in, you know, paralegal? And she's like, oh, I couldn't find a job. And I'm like, okay, well, you know, what happened? So she's like, every job that I found, they ask you to have 2 years of experience or more, you know, to you know, get the job. And I'm like, I found out that she wasn't even applying for these jobs. She just saw that they asked for at least 2 years experience, so she didn't apply. She told me her friends were telling her, you know, just apply for them anyway. And she was like, but then they're going to be like, well, you can't read because I told you in the description that you have to have 2 years experience. I told her, look, you know, like, and I told her about the law of attraction. And I told her that I'm going to get to the screenwriter. I see somebody just posted a question. So I told her that, you know, like you have to believe that you can get that job, or you have to believe that, you know, you can apply for the job and they'll call you. Because I'm like, there have been a lot of times where I've applied for jobs and I've gotten an interview, even though it didn't like, you know, serve the list. So as a screenwriter, a lot of screenwriters don't think that what they have to say, I'm getting to it now. So a lot of the screenwriters don't think that, well, okay, so Hollywood can be a very negative experience. I remember joining 2 years ago, like screenwriting groups on Facebook and everything. I had to get out of the groups because people were just so like jaded and unhelpful to each other. And it was just like, everybody just seemed so jaded. And the way the law of attraction can help you when you're a screenwriter in your personal life, first of all, you have to believe that you have something worthy to say. I've been told by producers in Hollywood that, you know, your script is irrelevant, like nobody goes through that. Like, and I remember thinking when the last person told me, somebody told me that I went to like a pitch fest, and the producer that I spoke to was like, you know, your idea is irrelevant because nobody gets treated badly if they are in this situation. You know, your movie's only going to get shown in New York City and LA because it's an indie film, and you know, this is not a relevant situation for people in Hollywood or New York City. And I was like thinking to myself, like, there's a whole lot more world out there than New York City and Los Angeles, right? And if, you know, you let people tell you what's relevant that you write, then you end up maybe not writing something that's important to you. And if you find that something is important enough for you to write a script about, that means that there are people out there who need to hear that. There are people out there who will respond to what you're writing about. But a lot of times producers in Hollywood are just thinking about like what's going to sell. They're not thinking about like what's going to impact people and what people need to, like, encouragement that they need to have. They're thinking like, well, this doesn't sell because, you know, X, Y, or Z, or this is what the trend is right now. If the law of attraction can help you have confidence in what you have to say, because you'll have a confidence that you can attract what you want. And if you want your script to be turned into a movie, if you know how the law of attraction works, you know you can manifest that.
And what does that mean? So like if you are somebody who's written your script and you believe in it and you keep putting out there that you believe in it, you will attract people, maybe slow.
Right.
It may not be the person that you need to get to the next step, but it may be somebody who then becomes your friend or becomes your colleague or becomes, you know, a co-writer on something. And then maybe that person leads to somebody else and that person leads to somebody else.
Right. And it may not even be like, you may believe in your script, and so you write the script, and it may not necessarily get produced, but it might get you other work. And then you find that you're working on a show that deals with an issue that you wrote about in one of your other scripts, and you get to contribute in that way.
Right.
So you get to contribute in that manner by just not giving up, you know, not giving up, and just knowing that you can manifest your dreams and your desires. A lot of times when people don't understand that that's how the law of attraction works, they just give up.
Right. But also, like, the law of attraction doesn't mean that you are just going to believe it and then like magically it's going to happen. You still have to do the work. You just have to be on a vibration level of positivity and believing in it, because if you don't believe in it, no one else is going to believe in your project. So it's like,
and
you have
the
to
other
be
thing
there.
about belief, the other thing about belief, like if you're a monk and you've been meditating for 40 years and you have like this high vibration, you actually might be able to manifest stuff out of thin air. But most of us don't have that. Like you have to take action, and you have to take action, and taking action shows that you believe. Like, so it's ask, believe, receive.
So let's go into that. Let's talk about, and this is specifically in your book that is in the chat. If you guys scroll up, and we'll put it in there again, go get Joy's book. It breaks it down a lot more, but let's talk about breaking down a script using the law of attraction. And you just said ask, believe, receive. So can you just talk through those?
Let's look at the movie Joy. And I didn't pick that movie because it has my name. It's the movie Joy that Jennifer Lawrence was in maybe 5 years ago. And it's also a good example because it's based on a person that was a real person. Joy Mangano is an inventor. She invented that mop that you can kind of wring out the mop without having to touch it. And before she invented that mop, that's not how mops work. People had to like mop and like touch the dirty mop head and all that. So anyway, in this movie, Act 1, it's just like how you've been traditionally taught that Act 1 shows the situation that the character is in. So in Act 1, she's in a situation where she's pretty much the sole provider for her whole family. Her divorced parents, her ex-husband, her 2 kids, her grandmother. She's the one making the money for the family. But during Act 1, we see that she had these dreams of becoming an inventor. She was really smart. She was valedictorian, all that, blah, blah, blah. So Act 1 is the ask. What do you want from the universe? So what Joy wanted, the character that Jennifer Lawrence played, what she wanted was to be an inventor. She didn't really have anything like necessarily specific at the time that she wanted to invent. She just knew that she wasn't living up to her full potential. So her ask to the universe was to get her like out of this situation that she was in where she was struggling and she was living up to her full potential. So that's her ask. Her ask is like she wants to be an inventor. Okay, so like towards the end of Act 1, she goes on a trip with her father and her father's new girlfriend, and she breaks, they're telling somebody on the boat, don't, use a real glass. Like they're having wine and everything. They're like, why did you bring a real glass? Because, the glass broke and got red wine all over her boat. So Joy was like, don't worry, I'll clean it up. So she's trying to clean up this broken glass. Her hand gets cut. Her hand's like all stained from the red wine. And she gets the idea, like she goes home, she starts making sketches. She starts drawing. She's like, I can come up with a mop that, like I don't have to touch it. You can wring it out, blah, blah, blah. This goes into Act 2. So Act 1 is the ask. What are you asking from the universe? What do you want? Okay. So, and that's how the law of attraction works. The law of attraction works: ask, believe, receive. So in Act 1, she asked, I want to be an inventor. I want to invent things. So at the end of Act 1, she comes up with an idea. So Act 2 is her belief. She has to believe in her idea. So she's trying to make a living off of this invention. So different things happen in Act 2 to show her belief. So she has to figure out how to design this mop. That's the first thing she has to do, because what makes this a valuable mop different from the mops that already exist. So she has to figure out a way how to design this mop. Then she has to get people together to work for her. So she has to get the money to pay these people to produce this mop. So she goes to her father's girlfriend, and this was based on a true story. What you'll find with the law of attraction is that when you start taking steps towards your dreams and your goals and everything, the universe helps you out. The universe is a friendly universe. Albert Einstein said once that your only decision you have to make in life, is the universe a friendly universe, or is it an unfriendly universe? So Joy is in a position where she has to make this mop. She has to put this together and everything like that. And this woman has come into her life who has money. So she's like, okay, let me pitch my ideas to this woman because I can get finance. So Act 2 is all about the steps you take to show that you believe in what you've asked for. Okay. So in Act 2 of Joy, she has to get the people together. She gets the money from Trudy. She's able to hire people to put the mops together. She's able to hire a manufacturer who makes the parts, that then she sends it to her crew who actually put everything together. Then she has another step that she has to go through. Nobody will put her mop on the shelves. Like, nobody at Kmart won't let her come in and sell her mop and everything. So now she has to figure out how she's going to sell these mops. So then another incident happens where her ex-husband has a connection at QVC. QVC is like the home shopping network or whatever. So she gets an interview. Bradley Cooper's character runs QVC. So she has to pitch to him. It's just like how a movie works in terms of obstacles, but you have to look at it in terms of the character manifesting what they want. So when you get to the end of Act 2, the manifestation is, at the end of Act 2 is does the person get what they want, or do they not get what they want? And in real life, sometimes when you're trying too hard and you're efforting a lot, like Esther Hicks will call it efforting, and you're trying and trying, sometimes if you try too hard or you are desperate about it, it doesn't come to you. So where typically in a 3-act structure, at the end of Act 2 comes the low point, where the person looks like they're not going to get what they want, right? So you still get to that low point, but it's a different reason why it's a low point, because at this point you have to let go. Sometimes in real life, when you let go is when the manifestation happens. So at the end of Act 2, the person kind of lets go.
It's surrender. It's surrender, and
they surrender. Yeah. And at this point, you've done so much, you've put so much, you've given the universe so much help to help you, that at this point in Act 3, Joy got what she wanted. She was able to sell her mop. She was able to have a profitable business. She was able to become so successful that she could help other female inventors who wanted to invent things. So it's ask in Act 1, believe in Act 2, and receive in Act 3.
And how did you come up with this sort of idea? I mean, was there a moment where were you watching a movie and you went, hey, I can take this part of what I'm learning about law of attraction and take this part of my screenwriting and put them together?
It came from the fact, to me, my whole purpose for writing screenplays was always to help people. When I figured out how to be happy, I wanted to help other people be happy. And I was when I learned the law of attraction, it immediately hit me that it's like act 1, act 2, act 3. I just couldn't, I couldn't like formulate the whole idea at the time. But it kind of hit me immediately, like act 1 is ask, act 2 is believe, and act 3 is receive. And I always felt like movies should teach you how to have a happy life. Mm-hmm. Like, I always felt like movies actually, because like if you look at Christopher Vogler's book, The Hero's Journey, mm-hmm. and if you look at old stories like from Greek mythology, like the journey of Odysseus, like they teach you, movies always teach you to look inside yourself. Mm-hmm. If you look at, even if you look at Disney films from like when you're a little kid, you look at Disney movies, Disney like taught a whole generation of people how to dream. You know, movies, I always felt like movies should teach people how to be happy, how to have a successful life. And when I learned the law of attraction, it didn't hit me right away. It took like 8 years or so before it really hit me that like this can help people manifest their dreams. And if everybody knew how to manifest their dreams, it would solve a lot of the problems in the whole world. You know, if people knew how to make their dreams come true, there would be less violence. You know, people wouldn't feel the need to take from others what they don't think they can have for themselves. There would just be a lot of, if people realize that the world is abundant, like that the universe is abundant and there's enough for everybody, then there would be a lot of the problems would be solved.
Mm. It's interesting. Sorry, my brain went like right into that place. So in regards to like law of attraction, I'm just going to jump to a question that popped up. Victoria is asking advice on not slipping from working hard into like desperation. Do you have any advice on that?
So one of the limiting beliefs, and the book talks about limiting beliefs too. That your character, like when your character can't really get what they want, you have to address limiting beliefs. And also, you are not saying in your script, this is the law of attraction. Like you're not like, just like Napoleon Hill did not point out that it was the law of attraction. He just showed you how to use it. You know, you're not saying in your script, oh, hey, everybody, this is the law of attraction and this is how you get what you want. No, you're just showing your character get it. So what was your question again? You just said, like, how can they not slip? How can you not
slip from hard work into being desperate, like desperation?
Okay, so this is what I was saying. So there's a belief in society that hard work is necessary to get what you want. And that's a limiting belief, because when you believe that you have to work really hard, then that's what happens. You're working yourself to the bone, and that's not healthy. There is a way, like, okay, so you have to ask yourself when you're trying to manifest something, are you being desperate, right? So if you're like visualizing, and you're visualizing every 30 minutes because you think that's going to make it come quicker, the message that you're giving to the universe is that I don't have it. So instead of it being like, oh, I'm just going to visualize over and over and over and over and over again, you're showing desperation instead of a knowing that you know that it's on the way.
Right.
So the fact, like, you have to be, like Esther Hicks says, you have to be easy about it. Like, you can't be like really desperate. There, like, I belong to a law of attraction group on Facebook, and some of the people post questions about like manifesting things, and you can tell by the way they worded their question that they're kind of desperate to get it. You can tell by the way that they worded the question that they don't have a knowing that it's going to come to them. So it's like a thin line between being secure and knowing that you're going to get it, and just acting like you're showing the universe that you don't trust that it's on its way.
So it's probably something like you have to just start the practice and make mistakes and figure it out, just like you would in writing. You're going to write a first draft and it might not be great. You're going to try to manifest something. It may not work, but you fine tune maybe how you put
So
that?
it's like, you know, for example, if you want $15,000, right? You're trying to manifest $15,000 in 30 days. But you find that you don't really believe that you can manifest $15,000 in 30 days. So you become desperate. So you have to, the thing you do is work on your belief system. How can I either believe that I can get $15,000 or lower the number so that I get to a number that I believe I can actually get?
Right.
So that is also part of act two. It could be, you know, the character trying to work on their beliefs so that they believe that they're worthy of getting what they want.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of
And
times
and
people
seeing
don't.
the signs, right? Like being aware, an awareness of you're asking for this, and it may not be handed to you, and just like your characters, it may not be handed to you or your characters in the way that you assume it's going to be. It
Right.
may be in a different way. So you have to really keep your eyes and ears open, and that's sort of synchronicity in a way.
Right. A good
Right?
movie about the law of attraction that doesn't ever mention the law of attraction. I don't remember the name of the movie, but it was Seth Rogen. Everybody knows what I'm talking about when I say who's in it. It was Seth Rogen and Charlize Theron.
Yeah,
And
the hot shot or big shot or something
it was
shot.
the movie where she was like running for president or vice president or
I'm
something.
sure
And
someone will say in the chat. Come on, guys. What's that movie?
yeah, what's that movie that
Big
Seth
shot,
Rogen
hot
and
shot,
Charlize Theron
last
are
shot.
in?
Yeah.
And you know, O'Shea Jackson Jr. is in the movie too.
Long shot. The
What's it
long
called? The
shot.
Long Shot. Yes.
Thanks.
So thank you. So in the movie, O'Shea Jackson Jr. is Seth Rogen's best friend from like elementary school or whatever. And you know, Seth has a crush on Charlize Theron, who used to babysit him when he was younger. And O'Shea, I don't remember their characters' names, but I know their real life names. So I'm just going to refer to them as their real life names. And O'Shea tells Seth, you know, you have to believe like you're worthy enough to date her. And basically what O'Shea is teaching him is like affirmations. So he tells him like what to say, like say, I am worthy, I love myself, or it's like something he tells him to say. So when he goes to this function where Charlize is at the function, she kind of takes him with her, but he sees her dancing with this other guy who I think is like her ex-boyfriend. So Seth Rogen's over on the sideline saying the affirmations over and over again. He's like, I am worthy. I am worthy of love. I am lovable, blah, blah, blah. That is the law of attraction. But nowhere in the movie do they call it the law of attraction. But that's how you get your mind right. Like, that's how you get your mind right so you can manifest what you want.
Right.
And Seth manifests a relationship with her.
Right. And it wouldn't have come along if he hadn't opened himself up to the idea that it may come around in a weird way of him like working
like,
for her.
He had to believe that he was worthy.
Right.
Because he didn't like limitless. If somebody just like said the word limitless, like he had to believe like I deserve to be in a relationship with a beautiful woman who's smart and like, cause you know, he can't look at himself as like, I'm a dork. I don't, you know, like I can't get this girl, you know, like that's not going to get him in the relationship. And I think a lot of times in movies, things happen where I'm watching movies nowadays and I'm like, yeah, they would have never manifested what they wanted because they don't believe in themselves, or they would have never, you know, gotten what they wanted, staying in that negative thought pattern that they're in. Like, you know, sometimes I look at movies and I'm like, yeah, in real life, they would have never gotten what they wanted.
Right. So let's talk about your book. We're going to wrap this up fairly soon. So let's talk about your book specifically and what what further information our attendees can get from your book.
There's stuff in the book about character that we haven't really talked about in the interview. I look at life and you look at the people in your life and it's looking at life with the belief system that everybody who comes into your life is for a reason. Like everybody's in your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And it's always looking at the people in your life and what you can learn from having them in your life. So it's like when you create your characters for your screenplay, you know, one thing that you kind of have to decide is which character knows how to get what the protagonist wants. And in the movie with Seth Rogen and Charlize Theron, when I wrote this book, I hadn't seen that movie enough times to include it in the book, so it's not in the book, but it's a great example of using the law of attraction. And basically, in that movie, Seth's friend O'Shea was the person who kind of knew the law of attraction. So you kind of have to decide, like, which character knows how life really works, because your protagonist is the one who's trying to figure it out. So, you know, it's kind of like, which functions do the characters play? Like, you have characters that are mentors, you have characters that are confidants, where, you know, you have somebody for them to bounce ideas off of. O'Shea's character in that movie, The Long Shot, was a confidant character. He was the one that Seth spoke to about his problem. He was a confidant, but in a way, because he was like coaching Seth on what to do, he also had a function of a mentor. So you want to decide, like, which character can teach these universal truths to the protagonist. Because the whole point is the protagonist doesn't know this already. The whole point is that the protagonist is learning how to manifest what they want. So that when people watch your movie, they are also learning how to get what they want out of life.
Right. So I'm going to go to a question that just popped up that I think is a good one, and I think maybe it can be helpful to everybody. Ray's asking, well, first she's saying, he or she, I used the law of attraction goal setting in my real estate career and it worked big time. Why does my screenwriting career seem like so much more of a challenge? I set goals to find a manager or agent, but so far nothing is happening.
Well, sometimes you have to look at, like, how many people want to be realtors in relation to how many people are looking for houses, and how many people want to write movies and make movies, and how many people are producing movies. So sometimes it's just a numbers thing. I remember it was an Esther Hicks like recording that I listened to, because you can like type in stuff on YouTube and bring up these seminars that Esther does. And when it comes to competition, the more you compete, the more you have people to compete with. So if you believe in the law of attraction and you are up for an Oscar, or you won an Oscar, there are only like a certain number of people who are going to be nominated for an Oscar. So you have to look at, you know, what is your goal? Like, is your goal to really get a producer or get an agent, or is your goal to make your film? And sometimes you might have to look at other ways to make that happen.
Right. I was thinking that too. I'm thinking like maybe there's some steps in between that, instead of, you know, thinking that is a great goal, but maybe there's some steps in between that you can start to get to that place where those people come to you.
So, you know, I'm reading the Code of Extraordinary, the Code of an Extraordinary Mind by Vishen Lakhiani. Vishen Lakhiani runs the company Mind Valley, and they do a lot of personal growth, webinars, and they do a lot of personal growth education. And he talks about like means goals and end goals. And your means goals are goals that people create because like somebody might say, I want to be a faster typist. But that's not the end goal that they really want. What they really want is to make enough money to get an apartment in Manhattan. So, but they're thinking, my only way to get this is by becoming a faster typist. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So you might be thinking like, I want my movie made, you know, and the only way for me to get that done is to get an agent or to get a producer. But when you look at how there are millions of people who want to do that as well, you know, like it's you still have to look at, you might believe deep down that, you know, I'm competing with 500 other people.
Right.
You know, the person, and this is another thing that is law of attraction-esque. Like I take acting classes, and my coach, Tom Todoroff, talks about how when you build your skill set and your craft, that makes you like what Vishen calls unfuckwithable, right? Like you're so good at what you do that you have the confidence that you're going to get a producer interested in your script, or you're going to get an agent. but that comes with practicing your craft. That comes with, you know, getting really, really good at what you do. That you get that confidence. And I feel like the people who do get agents and producers and people interested have such good writing skills that they have that confidence that they don't really doubt that somebody's going to be interested in their work.
Right.
Tom talks about that all the time, how when you practice your craft as an actor, you become so much better of an actor. Oh, somebody has worked with Tom. Yeah, Tom is awesome. You become so much better as an actor that, you know, you become the actor that doesn't take terrible parts. You know, you become so much more confident. And the same thing works with writing. You know, there are a lot of people out there who want agents and who want producers interested in their work. You know, I was talking to one of my former students who's in Hollywood right now pursuing a screenwriting career. I talked to him earlier today and I said, you know, there are different ways to do everything. For me, I got to the point where it's just like, I want to make my own stuff. And that's harder. Like, in some ways, that's harder to do. But for me, it was worth it. You know, for me, it's worth it to take that route because I want control over how my things get made. For other people, you know, like they don't want to deal with that. They don't want to deal with raising money. They don't want to deal with all of that kind of stuff. They just want to get somebody to make their film. So if that's the case, just get really good at your craft that you're so confident that you just know that you're going to get an agent or producer interested in.
But also, I want to add to that is that maybe you need to be very specific about what kind of manager and what kind of agent you're looking for, because just to put out there that you want an agent or manager and try to, you can get probably somebody in that space, but are they going to mesh well with you? Are they going to be the type of person that you want to work with in your entire career? Or is it going to be a nightmare? You know, I mean, you can go find somebody, sure. They can find you, sure, but you have to be specific in what you're asking for. And that might take a little bit longer to actually
look
get.
At Mindy Kaling, I love her. She's like one of my sheroes. And her first book was called like, Why Is Everybody Hanging Out Without Me? Or like her first memoir that she wrote, she talked about how she had written her play for the Fringe Festival in New York City, and she had got noticed. And she and her writing partner, who was her friend at the time, got sent out to Los Angeles, and they got put on this show. And it was funny because, you know, we all know Mindy as associated with The Office. We know her associated with her great show that she did after The Office, the Mindy Project. But this first project that she got put on, she was like, these people, like, it didn't sound like they knew how to make a good show. Like, they were looking at very superficial things to make a show. Like, how attractive are the people on the show? Like, they were looking at really frivolous things, and the show wasn't good. You know, it got canceled or it didn't even get picked up or whatever. And it's like you're saying, you be specific about what you want. After that, it's like, in Mindy's mind, it was like, she was like, okay, I want to be associated with good stuff, you know? And after that, she had an opportunity for The Office, you know?
Right.
And
but she got specific about, here's the type of thing. Now I know just getting flown to Los Angeles and having all this stuff happen is not really what's going to make me happy. What's going to make me happy is you have to elevate and then elevate and elevate what you're asking.
Like I said, some, you know, it's that phrase that nobody knows anything in Hollywood. And I think it's true to an extent. I think the people who know that they want to set trends instead of follow them are the people who set trends instead of following them. They're the people who like make a program and then everybody's like, oh, that worked, let's do that. Right. Instead of being the people that's like, well, we just have to do what's working right now.
I mean, I think this also relates to breaking it down into a script. So at the end of Act 2, when it's the low point, and it's like the character feels like all is lost or they're not getting what they want. It's also the same way in the law of attraction of maybe you weren't asking specifically or putting out there actually what you really want or really need to be happy. So it's like the beginning, you know, your first act and your second act are a lot of working through figuring out the right way to ask for what you actually need to be happy. So it's a
Right, because
lot of
some
like
people look
doing
at,
the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing. And then you kind of like realize, your character realizes like, okay, now I have to kind of, it's sometimes, I mean, it's
like
movie
in that
terms,
movie
but
with
like
Julia
starting at the
Roberts.
bottom. It's like, then you got to work your way back up again.
Remember the movie with Julia Roberts and Richard Gere where she kept Runaway Bride?
Mm-hmm.
She kept like running from the weddings that she was about to marry the guy, and she'd always run. And she finally learns like, oh, you know, like my relationships never worked out because I have to be myself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's kind of like what you're saying with being specific. Like Vishen Lakhiani talks about this in his book, The Code of the Extraordinary Mind, that there are rules. Like Vishen made up a term called rules, which means bullshit rules that, you know, people teach you, or you're so ingrained to think like, oh, I want to grow up and become a lawyer. But really, you have no interest in being a lawyer. Or, oh, I need to work in IT because those are the jobs that everybody's hiring for and you can make a lot of money, but you hate coding. You know, it's like you have to distinguish between the rules that society is ingraining in you that you want and what you really might, like your heart might really want.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay, so is there anything else that you want to touch on, or do you want to talk about where people can find you?
There is
to reach you?
It looks like there's one question in the question in A.
Okay, there's yes, Julian is asking, is there anything you learned from your experience teaching that you use in your screenwriting?
Huh.
You're like, a lot, probably.
I honestly didn't know the law of attraction when I was a teacher. So that's a really interesting question, because I didn't know any of this stuff when I was teaching. Because if I knew any of this stuff when I was teaching, I would have taught my students. Like, that's a great question. Anything that I learned from teaching that I can learn in screenwriting? Only like work ethic. You know, like I feel like when you're a teacher, you work so hard. Like teachers work so hard. And I've heard like from my former coworkers, I checked in on one of my coworkers yesterday who's a teacher still. He's been teaching for like 12 years now. And he's just like, teaching through Zoom is like 3 times harder than teaching kids in person. And it's just like nobody's listening. Like nobody is listening to the teachers and how they're like getting burnt out. I had a friend that's a teacher post on Facebook how she's like trying to study for her doctorate, and she's like trying to raise her kids and teach school, and she's just crying, you know. And like what I learned from being a teacher is like you work so hard, you have to have the same kind of like work ethic. And it's like the law of attraction exists and the law of attraction is real, but like you said, Shayna, you can't just sit there and like believe that it's gonna just manifest out of thin air. No, you, like Tom said with the acting, you have to have a work ethic. Like you have to write, you have to, you know, like you still have to go through the, like, what did Macklemore call it in his song 10,000 hours? You know, it takes like 10,000 hours to become like proficient at something. You still like from being a teacher and working so hard, it's the same type of work ethic you have to have if you want to be a screenwriter. Like you might not get discovered on your first script or your second script or your third script. You get like, you sell your 4th or 5th script and everybody thinks it's your first script. You know, like, I guess, you know, what I learned is the work ethic. Like you just have to like, and this is the difference between like working hard, like hard work. Like hard work a lot of times implies something that you don't really want to do. But you're working, I don't like to call it hard work. I like to call it diligent work because you enjoy it.
It's like working smarter, not harder.
And you like what you're doing. You know what I'm saying? You enjoy rewriting a script. So you enjoy trying to learn how to make a script more effective, or you enjoy like creating a character. You know, it's a lot of work, but it's not hard work, because hard work has a negative connotation with it. It's diligent, persistent work.
I'm going to write that down. Diligent, persistent work instead of hard work. Okay,
Somebody else has asked, do I have a meditation practice?
Oh, do you?
Yes, definitely. I attribute my meditation. I started meditating in 2016. So I learned the law of attraction in 2012 and wasn't introduced to meditating until 4 years like later, like, yeah, 4 years later, one of my friends from elementary school came back in my life and like told me like, hey, you know, check out Wayne Dyer. He has like a meditation CD.
Mm-hmm.
And so I purchased this CD. I actually purchased like an actual CD, and I would play it like, and I would do the guided meditation with Wayne Dyer in the morning, and then I do it in the evening. And I did that for several months. And then eventually I was like, I don't want to hear Wayne Dyer. I just want to sit in silence. And my meditation practice started, and I still meditate. I always aim for 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes at night. And like, meditation helps with anxiety. Meditation helps with creativity, because a lot of times in meditation, you get ideas because you're able to get still and connect to source energy. And you get to hear all those fabulous ideas that are already inside of you.
That's why so many good ideas come when you're in the shower, because you're completely like zoned out. And then you're like, whoa, what a good idea.
Yeah. And like, you know, I haven't been freaking out over the pandemic because I just feel calmer because I meditate. Meditation makes you less anxious. Like, you just get less anxious overall.
So do you just sit in silence and like try to get everything out of your brain, or do you do mantras while you're meditating, or what do you do?
There are different types of meditation. You can do guided meditations. A lot of people who are first starting out do guided meditations. That's how I started. But I prefer to try to just sit in silence. And it's okay if you have thoughts that come up while you're trying to clear your mind. It's fine. Like, you know, it's not natural to turn off your brain. So if you have thoughts that pop up during meditation, just acknowledge the thought and just be like, okay, I'm gonna focus on my breath again.
Right.
You know, it's not like, don't beat yourself up if you're trying to meditate and thoughts are coming in your mind, because it's not really a natural state to turn off all your thoughts.
The monkey mind.
Somebody else has a question.
Okay.
So isn't the law of attraction really the law of creation? I've heard of the law of creation. I don't know enough about it to be able to effectively answer that, but the law of attraction, there are a lot of different types of laws. Like, the law of attraction is the most popular universal law, but there are a lot of other ones too. I don't know enough about the law of creation off the top of my head to be able to like answer if it is, but the fact is that we are powerful creators. Like, as human beings, we are, you know, like, I'm not getting religious, but people say like, you know, God, in the Bible, it says we're made in God's image. I think of that as not being like with arms and legs and two eyes and a mouth, but with the creative powers that we're made to create. Because we're humans, we create art, we create food, we create like, you know, different types of food that we cook that animals don't do. You know, animals just live instinctually, they don't create. You know, but we are humans, we create art, we create buildings, architecture, we create systems of living, all kinds of things. We're like, I feel like that's the image, like being made in God's image is because we are able to create things.
Right.
But I can't answer the question about the law of creation, that like I can't answer it competently because I don't know enough about it. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. So let's wrap this up, and let's, where can people find you? Where can, we already know where to get your book on Amazon, but where can people find you? Are you on Twitter? Are you online?
Can I answer this question?
Oh, sure. Another one popped up? Yeah.
Yes. So somebody says, before you go, can you tell the story of how you use this to create a specific project from idea to manifestation? Okay. So my project that I made most recently that actually got shot and produced was actually about an experience I had when I was 18. I was hospitalized for psychosis, and I was in the hospital for 5 days, and you know, they did not give me a diagnosis. This film is called NOS, and this is the last project that I made that got produced. It was on Shorts TV back in June, and it's available on Amazon. But my goal during that whole 5 days was to get out of the hospital. So my ask to the universe was like, why am I here and how can I get out? So, you know, I basically was like trying to figure out like, why do they have me in this like mental ward? And by the end of the film, by the end of the short film, I had figured out like, you know, why I was locked up in the hospital and what I needed to do to get out of the hospital. And the whole process of making that project, a lot of the law of attraction was involved in just things coming together for the project. This is an example of how your beliefs totally manifest regardless of what you believe. So in Hollywood, I'd read a bunch of articles that said that it took 5 years to make a movie. Like the average project takes 5 years to make a movie, right? So I didn't know this, but I had internalized that belief that it takes 5 years for the majority of scripts to go from a script to an actual produced project. And I manifested that. I decided I was going to make that short film in 2012, and it didn't actually get shot till 2017. It took 5 years, like exactly. And I also had another limiting belief that I had to go broke to make my short film. So while I did get grants to make the film, like the people who gave me the biggest grant, they just kind of decided how much money they wanted to give me. And they gave me just enough to have to max out all my credit cards because I had that belief. I believed, you know, from Kevin Smith, who made that movie back in the 90s, he kind of maxed out all his credit cards. And I had internalized that belief. I heard it over and over again from not just Kevin Smith, but other filmmakers that had maxed out their credit cards. And I had that belief that to get my film done, I had to max out my credit cards, which manifested. But there were good things that manifested as well. I needed to have a fiscal sponsor to get the money to make my project. And I had done work to find a fiscal sponsor. I'm like applying for small little grants that I could apply for on my own. I was also like just applying for fiscal sponsorship and nothing happened, right? Like I did not find a fiscal sponsor. So I saw an application for a small grant. It was like $2,000, not nearly enough to make my film. So I, you know, applied for it. I'm like, whatever, I don't need a fiscal sponsor for this grant, so I'm gonna apply for it. I applied for the grant and didn't hear anything back from them. So one day I'm in Barnes and Noble just chilling and my phone rings. I pick up the phone and it's like this woman. She's like, hi, you know, my name is XYZ. You applied for a grant with my organization and I wanted to let you know you didn't get the grant. And I'm thinking like, she called me just to tell me that I didn't get the grant. Like, okay, thank you. And she was like, no, like you did not get the grant, but I really like your writing. I think you're a good writer. I want to give you fiscal sponsorship. So it's an example of I put in effort. Nothing happened when I put in the effort at first, but if I had never applied for that grant, I wouldn't have gotten a fiscal sponsorship. So the fiscal sponsorship, like actually like the universe stepped in and helped me out. That was one example of the law of attraction actually working in my favor. Another example was that when I first wrote that short film, I was in college and I couldn't find like a location for it because it took place like in a hospital type setting. And so I was like, you know, I'm going to put this aside and do this script later. So when I actually got the money to make the film, I had a colleague that I had met like 5 years earlier, and I reached out to her and I was like, hey, do you want to work on this project? Like, I need to find a location. And, you know, my colleague was like, sure, I'll help you. And we found a location in like the most magical type of way because somebody recommended a university to her, and we went to go look at the location. While we're looking at stuff, I'm like, this isn't right. Like, I don't like this location for the film. The woman who was giving us a tour started randomly talking about another part of their university. she started talking to us about the nuns that used to live at the school and how all the nuns left and they just had this space left. So I was like, can we look at that space?
Right.
So she was like not really wanting to show us the space, right? She's like, nah, like you're not interested in that. Like nobody cares about that. And I'm like, can we just see it? So we go and look at the space and it turns out that it's perfect for what I'm looking for. And because it's a part of the university nobody cared about, we got a really good deal.
Right.
On renting
Like
the space.
dream.
And like, so it's like the law of attraction really did work in me getting that project done. It worked in the negative ways where it took 5 years and I maxed out all my credit cards, and it worked in the positive ways, like how I got a fiscal sponsor and how I found the location.
Right.
And just everybody involved in making the film just came to me in such a magical way. Like, but all along the way, I'm putting in effort. I'm not just sitting back and being like, I want to make this film and everything's just going to come to me.
Right.
Like,
I mean, it's the same in a script. Like your character can't just sit there and wait for things to happen to them. They have to push the action. So they have to do things.
And I learned that from filmmaking. I learned that from being a screenwriter, because it's like the protagonist has to move the story forward. And that's just like our lives. We have to move the story forward. We can't just sit and wait for life to happen to us.
Right.
We're the protagonists of our lives. And like, I found a great team to make my short film, but I sat down and went through like just individual emails, one email after another. Like I had a list of cinematographers and I basically just emailed everybody on that list, not in a mass email. Individually, I reached out to each cinematographer. So it was like I was doing work, but it's like the universe helped me out because I found a cinematographer that I still work with.
Right.
I found an editor that I still work with. And that was like 8 years ago.
But that is what you were talking about. That's thoughtful, doing the work thoughtfully, or whatever you said, precision, or I don't know what you said.
Persistence.
Diligent persistence, right. Instead of doing a mass email and sitting there and waiting, and then you have to do hard work. Then it's like harder because then you're like, I just emailed 20 people and nobody replied, or blah, 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 and then it becomes harder because now you think nobody wants to work with you. Then you have to go do more hard work to find new people.
The secret to that was that I never had the thought in my mind that people didn't want to work with me.
Well, great.
So, and it's a lot of times you have to think about, how do you think about something? Like, what are your thoughts? Because I didn't realize
because you thought that, you knew that instinctually you had to email everybody separately because you gave them the same care.
My friend who kind of came to me and taught me about meditation, I was talking to him one day and he said, oh, what you just said is like an affirmation. And I can tell you really believe that. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh, I never thought about that. But it's like what Tom says with the acting. When you put in a lot of work and effort and you know you're good at what you do, it gives you a certain level of confidence.
Right.
So you don't say like, oh, this producer's not going to really like my script. Like, oh, I don't really have a chance. Because it's like people talk themselves like in their head. That's a lot of how people's thoughts sound. Like, oh, they're really not going to like this, or the reader's going to hate this, or, it's a lot of negative talk going through people's heads a lot of the time.
Right. So switch that up, everybody. All right. So we have no more questions. Let's wrap this up. Tell people where they can find you, how they can reach you.
I am on Twitter at Joy Cheriel, and I actually go on Twitter a lot more than Instagram. Like, I don't really go on Instagram too much, but I'm at Instagram at Joy Cheriel as well. My Instagram page is basically like when I watch a good movie or a really good TV show, I find a picture that represents the movie or the TV show and I write a comment about it. But on Twitter, I post a lot more. It's easier to engage with me on Twitter than it is on Instagram, actually. But I'm at Joy Cheriel at both of those places. My production company is Third Person Omniscient Productions.com. There's a mailing list there that you can hear about future projects and different things that we have going on. Next year, I'm hoping to produce a play that we are planning to distribute digitally, since, we can't have an audience like we would really like to have because of COVID. So if you go and join the mailing list, you can keep up with future things that we have going on.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Joy, for this conversation. And everybody go to Amazon and get Joy's book if you want the to dive in further to all, you know, the act breakdowns and characters and things like that, what she's talking about. And go to the ISA events page for upcoming events. We have a really great one next week. I believe it's on the 30th with Suzanne Gunderson, which kind of goes along with this whole idea. She is going to do some energy tapping and things like that to help you kind of get through blocks or get through creative stopping points for yourself. I'm totally messing up describing that, but she's awesome and it's going to be a really great time. So join us next Wednesday, and everybody have a great weekend.